But it was worse than that. Hieroglyphics had symbols for whole words, parts of words, and determinatives that were not pronounced, but were visual cues for the reader. I could see how these symbols would be hard to learn and hard to use. In contrast, the alphabet was based entirely on the sounds that each letter stood for. Suddenly, writing became simple enough for common people to learn, and this is how we continue to teach reading and writing today.
Cat.
For the writer and the reader, it simplified things greatly. And these were entirely phonetic, and he could actually take and make his own words.
The ornate artwork of hieroglyphs were specially designed to be used on grandiose monuments, not on scrolls. This is another advantage for using an alphabet.
And in fact, if you're writing something like the book of Exodus or the book of Genesis, it takes less room to write it. If it was trying to be written down with something like hieroglyphics, it would have taken miles of papyrus in order to write that particular book.
The complex pictograms of hieroglyphs were replaced by the simplified strokes of letters. The genius of the alphabet would revolutionize history. With only a handful of letters, the alphabet was powerful enough to express an infinite number of words. Words for every idea, on every page of every book found in libraries around the Western world. From children's books to scientific journals to Bibles. And when I examined the relationship between the Bible and the alphabet through history, I saw that no other book in the world was translated into more languages than the books of the Bible. I went to see Hebrew scholar Brian Rickett. He showed me amazingly complex structures and nuances in the Torah text that would require the power and flexibility of the alphabet.
Here's what we know. This is an extremely well-written, complex document that reflects mastery of the language, linguistic mastery, a remarkable uniformity from beginning to end. It reflects sophistication, elegance, artistry, all the kinds of things you might look for in a piece of world-class literature. The Torah itself has it.
And every Torah scroll that has been found was written in a Hebrew alphabet. It was clear that this would require another step to look for in my investigation. If Moses wrote the Torah, and just as importantly, the Israelites were able to read it, they would have needed the power of an alphabet. The question is, was there an alphabet available at the time of the Exodus? I went to George Washington University to see a professor of Northwest Semitic languages. I wanted to know more about why mainstream scholars doubt that Moses could have written the early books of the Bible. Professor Christopher Rolston is an expert in the ancient Semitic family of languages, one of which is Hebrew. Do you think that the Hebrews were in Egypt, that there was really the story, the narrative of the Bible that places them there?
I believe that there was an Exodus, but I think the narratives grew through time to become stories almost of Homeric proportions.
Mm-hmm. Homeric meaning Homer?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Meaning that there was some exaggeration.
It's a term that we could use. I'm a practical person, and ultimately I know that, just as you do, that stories are told and retold and told again. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the stories grow and the details change through the telling in different times and different places. So the narratives in the Bible I find to be beautiful, the narratives about the Exodus. But the details, I think, are not always so precise.
But if it's not accurate, can I really trust it? Is there a God who saves the oppressed? Or is this more or less a fairy tale? Some say more, and some say less. When does evidence for the earliest Hebrew alphabet or script first appear?
We know the Hebrew script very well, begins about 900 BCE, and it's very distinctive. It's different from Phoenician. It developed from Phoenician. So the Hebrew script is a distinctive script, and we know it well from hundreds and hundreds of inscriptions.
If the Hebrew script wasn't available until 900 BC, some see this as a big problem for Moses writing the first books of the Bible at the time of the Exodus. This is the first step of the pattern that I'm looking for. What could be the answer to this problem? Do you think that it was an earlier form of it? A Hebrew form that Moses could have used that evolved over time?
The script certainly evolved during the course of time, but its evolution begins around 900 BCE.
We don't know what he wrote, and he would have written in Egyptian probably, if he had written, not Hebrew.
The logic makes sense. In the standard view, there's no Hebrew alphabet available at the time of the Exodus, so Moses couldn't write the early books of the Bible. And if that's the case, can the Bible's accounts of God acting in history really be trusted? For example, when the book of Exodus says that the sea miraculously parted, and the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left, was that something Moses actually saw with his own eyes? Or was it just the invention of someone writing centuries later? These thoughts were troubling to me. The reason I cared so much goes back to how I was raised. My parents' marriage broke up when I was really young, and it was extremely painful. Being the oldest of four siblings, I had the responsibility to watch my brother and sisters because my mom couldn't be there all the time. So when we went to the park or we went sliding, I was on duty. And that's what happens when your folks break up. You end up becoming, if you're the oldest, sort of responsible. I became the man of the house. My mother, as a single parent, would read Bible stories to us every night before we went to bed. She put a lot of faith in the idea that they were true. She believed that if God helped people in the past, he could help her make it as a single parent with 4 kids. It was very important to her. The Bible gave her hope, and she wanted it to be important to her family as well. Growing up hearing these stories from the Bible, I had always assumed they really happened, and they really intrigued me. But the question is, did I believe this just because it was the way I was raised? If I'd been raised in another part of the world, wouldn't I believe something altogether different? Did I believe the Bible because it was true, or because it's just what we believed?